Hey there, welcome to my front yard in the middle of the day. I am out here with my good friend Cameron. We are basically taking a few shots, testing out the recommendation that I shared a few weeks ago. I shared that my frustration with the R6 is sometimes when I'm on a roll and I'm moving fast, my shutter could be a little bit outside of the safe zone and I could have a little bit of a motion blur situation with my shutter being too low. And so there's this long list of comments and everyone's like, you should be doing this, try this. One of the recommendations we heard over and over again was, why don't you just shoot with auto ISO? So I'm like, all right, I'll try it. Well, I'm gonna try it and I'm gonna tell you what my honest opinion is. All right, so as someone who has shot manually for 13 years, fully manually, I've never tried auto ISO. I don't shoot auto anything. I've been very anti-auto things for 13 years. So instead of just writing it off and being like, no, there's no way, I'm not gonna give it a shot, I am gonna try it, see what I think, and give you my honest opinion. All right, so what I'm doing now, I'm gonna do it in full manual, which is normally what I would do. So I'm adjusting everything, I'm in control of everything. ISO, shutter, aperture, I'm in control. That's what I'm doing first. Super bright, so that means my first marker is my ISO is gonna go as low as possible. There's no need for my ISO to be high, so I'm gonna go down to 100 ISO. Then my priority is going to be figuring out what I want the style of the photo to be, and so I think that's determined a lot by aperture, and if you have a lot of light, you have a lot of wiggle room with your aperture, and I'm only shooting one person, so that's gonna go down to, let's say 2.0 to be safe. Actually, maybe 1.8 just for fun. And then I'm looking, and now I'm gonna adjust my shutter to expose properly. We have some blown out highlights in the background. We're shooting literally in the middle of the day. So we're gonna ignore the highlight blown out in the background, but her skin is exposed for nicely and perfect. All right, so now I'm gonna switch over to auto ISO, which means that my camera is determining based on what it's reading, what the ISO needs to be in order to get proper exposure. All right, so what I'm gonna do, we're gonna kind of create a hypothetical situation. Let's say that I'm photographing children, they're moving, I wanna stop motion, so I'm gonna crank my shutter up higher than it actually needs to be for that movement. So let's say I'm gonna put it at 1/1600th of a second.
Okay, hi. Quick explanation here. So what we're trying to simulate with choosing a 1600 shutter speed is in a dark situation where you have your shutter as low as it can go. So let's say the lowest you feel comfortable taking your shutter would be 1/200th of a second. Now let's say you're in a dark situation and that's the lowest you feel comfortable taking your shutter, and then you have your aperture set to 2.0 or whatever, right? Then in that situation, auto ISO would kick in and it would start adjusting your ISO for exposure, right? So basically we're just like recreating that scenario, but because we're outside and it's really bright, our low minimum shutter has to be pretty high, so 1600, in order to create a situation where the ISO is actually going to change from shot to shot to shot. If we kept the shutter speed any lower than that, then the camera would just go to 100 ISO and this wouldn't really prove anything. So the only reason why we're doing this is to show what happens when the ISO is the only variable that's going to change from shot to shot to shot. So that's why Katelyn's not adjusting her shutter here. You're going to see her only adjusting the camera using exposure compensation and then letting auto ISO do its thing. We just kind of had to force it to happen in this situation.
Okay, my aperture is 1.8. My shutter speed is 1/1600th of a second, and it's reading with exposure compensation at neutral that my ISO is at 320.
How does the exposure look?
It's a little darker than I would like, but it's decent. So if I think that it looks a little bit too dark here, and then I'm gonna adjust with exposure compensation here, very quickly becomes, and our sun just disappeared. But maybe that's good. The sun disappeared, so I'm going to go back to neutral. It's way underexposed. I'm gonna try to adjust this way. And let's take a shot like this. And ISO bumped up to 800, now it's at 640. All right, so what I'm gonna do, the sun is coming and going. I'm gonna do a variety of different shots. It's the 85 millimeters, so I'm gonna back up a decent amount. I'm gonna shoot tight, wide. I'm just gonna shoot as if I was shooting a portrait session and getting a lot of different variety to see how auto ISO kind of handles the exposure changing when I'm not just shooting really close with the same framing. So I'm only gonna adjust exposure with exposure compensation, which is odd for me, but I'm gonna try it. Okay, so here we go. We're in this setting, and this looks decent. It's a little dark, so let's go up to here. There we go. Perfect, let's do another one. It's getting a little too, it feels out of control. Okay, here we go. I'm gonna make a little adjustment again. Okay, now I'm gonna get a little tighter. I'm gonna shoot vertically, just change it up. Okay, you're so good. Let's do a model shot. Looking out towards Ty. I'm gonna make it a little bit brighter. Okay, eyes looking right here at me. Beautiful. Perfect. Okay. I'm gonna back up. You stay right there. Going all the way back. It's still kind of shaded, which is nice. All right, now we are overexposed. That's still underexposed now. Oh, I don't like this. Go ahead, laugh over at Ty for me. Perfect. I'm normally using spot metering. It was on evaluative metering, so I changed it to spot metering, which is my normal, and it is better. I feel a little bit more in control. Oh, I just tried to change my shutter. Okay, hold on. All right. I think the other thing that's kind of a whoa, I'll tell you what doesn't work. Okay, so with this thing, I have to focus and recompose. Focus and recomposing spot metering with exposure compensation and auto ISO is a nightmare. It's not good. Okay, so that's a good lesson learned. Ooh, 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 ooh. Okay. Yeah, I mean, I feel like it's a little bit better, but I just don't like the camera thinking for me. I don't like the camera making decisions, and I feel like I'm taking more time to adjust for the camera thinking. Oh. Whoa! Whoa! When I was doing spot metering, that did help some, but then when I back up and I'm trying to focus and recompose, which I realize I don't normally focus and recompose, but someone who does still focus and recompose, this would apply to them. Every time I do that, it's triggering the camera to change the settings to what I don't want. I could do an exposure lock, but then we're layering all these unnecessary settings. They're not unnecessary. It's just a lot. I would rather go back to the basics and just be aware of my shutter speed. Now, I get it. Normally, having a low shutter speed with a mirrorless camera, like that type of issue, is not happening in a setting like this. It's happening in a low light situation. But I would much rather find what I consider like a more natural or like kind of grassroots way to handle that than to come up with, this just seems really complicated to me. And to someone who's always shot like this, it's not complicated at all. But for someone like me, who's been controlling every aspect of my camera forever, for 13 years, this seems like overkill. Like it seems like I'm focused so much on, and maybe I get used to it, but it seems like I'm focused so much on making sure my camera doesn't make the wrong decision. I'd rather focus more on what I'm doing and be in control of my decisions. So when I'm shooting manually, I'm thinking about one thing, and for the majority, like 90% of the time, it makes it super simple. And the rare case that I have like a low shutter issue that I'm not aware of is when the light is shifting. I just feel like there's a better way, an easier way to be aware of that. When I'm doing things with auto ISO, I'm thinking about setting it to auto ISO. I'm thinking exposure compensation. Now I'm thinking I probably need to deal with exposure lock. It's all these different things that I'm trying to wrap my mind around, and it's just more complicated. And the other thing I don't love is and maybe I could get better at this, but the few images I was taking, I can't sync edit those. I can't batch edit those. They're off because I'm not fully in control. So like if the light changes, which it is changing today, and a big cloud comes and it gets darker, I would rather all the images from that set be darker than for my camera to be gauging with each shot like, oh no, it needs a little more of this, or no, we're gonna go from 400 ISO to 600 ISO. And like that is gonna mess up my editing flow in an extreme way. So I'm making more work for myself than if I had just controlled it myself. All right, so while I don't love the idea of auto ISO, I did love the suggestion that a lot of you gave about setting a minimum shutter speed. Setting a minimum shutter speed means that I'm saying I'm gonna set a shutter speed, and I cannot get it below that. Even if I'm shooting fast and I need more light, even in the midst of a crazy situation, my camera won't let me go to an unsafe zone. So I'm going to show you what it looks like to actually set that up. Okay, so I'm going to go to my menu, and I'm going to go all the way over to the camera, the orange setting. This is with the R6. And so if you go to menu 2 and go all the way down to shutter speed range, then click OK. My lowest shutter speed is set to 250. So if you select that and then use your back wheel, you can go down. There's different predetermined sets, so you could do like 60, 125, 250. I'm at 250 just because I'm shooting with a zoom lens, and it goes up to 70 millimeters, and so I just want to be safe. 140 is probably the lowest I should go. And so the other option is 125, so 250 is just a really safe range for me. So this is really nice because in the situations where you're moving fast, maybe the light is changing, you don't realize how low your shutter is getting. It protects me from making a mistake that I cannot fix later, which was what that whole video was about. So I love this suggestion. Didn't love the auto ISO suggestion. I'm sure it works for a lot of people, but I'm very thankful for you guys pointing out this option. So just to wrap this up, what I have found doing this is that I just love to be in control, which my husband would say is not just in this part of my life, but I really do love to be fully in control of my camera because I don't want to deal with my camera making decisions for me, which then results in really inconsistent editing. So even if I learned how to manage auto ISO, exposure compensation, maybe some exposure lock if needed, if I got all that down, I'm still, even if I was super familiar with it, I'd still deal with the inconsistencies from my camera making adjustments for me. I want to keep my work as consistent as possible inside my camera and stay in control because honestly, what I'm controlling, it's not just the final image, it's controlling my editing process as well. For those of you who are like, oh my gosh, I can't believe she's never used it before. She's been shooting for 13 years. Honestly, I've never needed this. I've never had this problem until mirrorless ever. And so I needed this suggestion and I'm thankful for it. So we've got a good community here on YouTube. If you're not a part of it, make sure you subscribe and like, comment so I can hear feedback and I can let you know what I can help you with in the future. We have new videos that come out every Thursday. I will see you next time. Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Cameron's got a cute little bye. Bye.